end of World War I, and that involves a lot of stuff. Because it ended in a very, very strange way, and because it ended in such a strange way, a lot of people felt it was an unfinished business, so they had to do another round. Then it called World War II. Couple of things about World War I. Why do we call it World War I? It's really the most important question. And the focus on this world. Why was this a world war? Because, I mean, all the things that we talked about so far it started somewhere in Bosnia, and it involved Russia, France, Germany, Austrian Empire, Great Britain. These are all European countries, European powers. Why don't we call, European War I? Well, okay, it wasn't the first European war, but why don't we call it European War number 278? Or, people called it the Great War. Why? Because it was the biggest war, the largest war in terms of casualties and effort, and armies in the field and things of that sort. Why don't call it just the Great European War?
It affected, like, your chain of events. It affected basically
in what way?
the entire world. Like through imperialism, through supply and demand, like, and just everything.
So this is what I would like to explore with you today. The sort of non-European aspects of, or let's say global aspects of World War I. But there is a short formula to remember. There are a lot of details with these wars, and as always with details, you can get lost in details. There's a simple way to look, a really simple way, to look at World War I and World War II. It was a war for global dominance between basically two powers. There are other powers that popped up, France, Russia, and so forth. But if you really simplify to the bone, it was a war between the British Empire and the German Empire. Two of them. For global dominance. During World War I and World War II, Great Britain had achieved global dominance. German Empire, or later German Reich under Hitler, wanted to challenge that dominance. And the question is then, who won? Well, obviously Germany didn't win, right? But the question is, did the British win?
Not really.
It's one of those situations between this, World War I and World War II that when two people are fighting, the third one comes around and the third one would be who? Yeah. These United States. Well, in 1945 it looked as if it was going to be the USSR, the Soviet Union, and the United States. Now I know that a lot of French people will be deeply offended by this view of things, but it's a simplification. When you simplify things, something's going to suffer. But I'm telling you this is an easy way to remember. Now, you mentioned imperialism, and in spite of all the hoopla and interesting stuff about Franz Ferdinand, and I'm referring to the Archduke and not to band, whatever, Archduke, and from Austro-Hungary, and he went into Bosnia and something happened and blah, 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 so forth. John told you a lot of this story, and I started the last time around. It was a chain reaction that Roman Empire, often called the alliance of three Kaisers, like the Kaiser rolls. Kaiser. German for Caesar. And three emperors. German, Austrian, and the Ottoman. So that particular fact that, these three emperors were on the one side and they were sandwiched by Russia on the east and by France and Great Britain on the west. That's how it ended up. You also remember from last time that Great Britain sort of waited till the last moment to enter into the war. And as long as the Great Britain was kind of waging its options, and this is going to happen again, that's why I'm mentioning it, before World War II, Great Britain is going to wage its options for quite some time, even much more than in this case, in the case of World War I. It could have stayed the local European war. That was the plan. The way they envisioned it in August of 1914 is, we'll be home by Christmas. It's going to be picnic in the park. Like we think of things, in Libya. Oh, we're going to drop a couple of bombs and get out of there, and Gaddafi's going to be gone, and it's going to, in 2 weeks, it's all going to be fine. That's what they thought. We'll be home for Christmas. That's where it came from. In August, they thought, we'll be home for Christmas. Well, they were not home for Christmas, and when they came back home, there was not much home left. What do I mean by this? Well, one of the main characteristics of this World War I was that it was a total war. Total war. And remember, I said total, not global. It was global, but it was also total. What's the difference between global and total?
Global means that everyone is involved. Total means that everything is put into it.
Everything. Whole societies. Whole societies. It means that it wasn't just the war of armies, sort of like the way we do it now. We send a couple of 100,000 people somewhere, and we see them in the airports. It's, hi, congratulations, thank you for protecting our freedom. But do we actually feel the war effort around us? Life goes on as normal. This was not such a war. How come?
They used factories, textile mills to make uniforms, and all the guns that were in gun factories went to there. They started taking iron from other companies and downgrading how much they got to go to other places to help build stuff for the war. And everything was converted into the war effort.
Excellent. So you have millions of people. The armies that were in the field counted in millions.
It was people in the home front too were working to help the soldiers with materials and supplies and whatnot.
And actually that was the thing that eventually ended the war. Because, when you have to supply millions of people that are at the front,
You're eventually going to run out.
that's the first priority. So, when the trains run, first the train that goes to the front is going to pass, then another train that goes to the front, then maybe after 5, 6 of these trains, we'll let the civilian train distribute food around. So by 1917, 1918, there was widespread famine in Europe. In some places like Vienna or some places in Germany, Germany was under blockade, the naval blockade. The British didn't allow any ships to dock in German ports in order to starve Germans to death. Rations, daily rations. Food was rationed, and daily rations were in the ballpark range of, let's say, 3/4 of a pound of bread per day per person, and that's it. There were some rations for meat, but you get a coupon, but you can't get meat.
There is none.
So what do you do with 3/4 of a pound of bread per day?
You starve.
There is not much you can do with it. what people kind of resorted eventually is, I don't know, you go to a park and get some grasses and mix that bread with water, and very often people would use ashes. It fills your stomach, and you boil it, and then you eat that soup 3 times a day, pretend it's a meal. And other things, it wasn't just the food, but of course, clothes last a little bit longer, so they're all old and ripped apart and things of that sort. But heating was a big problem because coal was the main source of heat in all European cities at this time. Can't have it. Therefore, you start with a wooden floor. Oh, okay, a wooden floor. So, you burn your wooden floor, then you move to the bookcases, then you move to the books, then you move to other pieces of furniture, until you're left only with your mattress. Because the bed frame is, good, solid, it can, keep you warm for a day or two, well, in a couple of days. Right? And this is actually what happened at the end of World War I. We're trying to talk about how the war ended. There was no stunning military victory at the end. I mean, people pretended this and that happened, but Germany just sued for peace, asked for ceasefire. But
Famine won.
huh?
The famine won.
That's why I call it total war. Let's get back to our theme to expand World War I into the world outside of Europe. Well, the first great power to be knocked out of the war was Russia. And actually, I have a list somewhere here of various fronts of, where was it? Various fronts of World War I. And I didn't include all of them. Well, there is the Western Front. John talked about it last time around. It's a fascinating place, but as far as, military events go, there was not much change throughout the 4 years of the war. Yeah, there was this offensive and that offensive, and the Allies jumped out of the trenches and say, by tomorrow we'll be eating sausages in Berlin, and they ended dead in the no man's land between the trenches. And then the Germans rose up and said, we'll be drinking coffee in Paris in 2 hours, and they ended dead in the no man's land. I'm simplifying, but that's what we need to do. We need to do world history in 15 weeks. So, other fronts are actually much more dynamic. An Eastern Front was one of them. There was the Italian Front, the Balkan Front, the Ottomans were involved in various kinds of operations. In Africa, with the Russian Empire. Where with the Russian Empire? In the Caucasus area. That is here, the border between the Ottoman Empire and Russia. Caucasus area. And they were involved in operations with the British in the Middle East, in Iraq. That actually, the Middle East, then extend the fronts and the involvements into British India. Because the British used Indian troops in the Middle East. Which kind of led to a lot of resentment in India. Why are we fighting this war? And we're still a colony of Great Britain. So, let's get back to these fronts. Did we cover all of them? Just to mention them. War in the Atlantic is the war for resources. You have German U-boats trying to stop Allied shipping. In war in the colonies, we're talking about, for example, Africa. The first thing that Great Britain and France did was to take over German colonies. Now, there were not that many German colonies around. There was German West Africa and German East Africa. But they did this and never returned them. One of the big issues before we get into Eastern Front, into a little bit more detail, was the issue of propaganda and why did they actually fight? Well, the Western Allies in particular, Great Britain and France, wanted it to be a war about freedom and democracy. But then, you know, all wars are about freedom and democracy. Well, anyways, what I'm trying to say is, there is a point to it. All three of these countries on the opposing side, German Empire, Austrian Empire, Ottoman Empire, were not exactly keen on, you know, liberal civic values. They had some sort of representation, but it's true that it did not come close to the level of, you know, civil liberties that existed in the United Kingdom and in France, in the French Republic. So to some extent, you know, there was a point there. However, since the casualties started to mount, and, you know, one comedian actually once said that instead of like doing this thing on the Western Front, each side could have just shot about 20,000 people a day and with the same effect. This was the amount of casualties when divided by the number of days in combat. Well, let me give you some figures. Where are those figures? Oh, yes. Here they are. The total amount of dead wounded. France, about, I don't know, 1.4 million. Now, wounded. In 1914 to 1918, it was much more, but very different than being wounded today. Being wounded today means, you know, they shot you in the arm. They give you penicillin, antibiotics and stuff of that sort, so you have your arm, and you can heal. In 1914, it usually meant that an arm or a leg needed to be amputated. So we're talking about, you know, 4 million, what used to be called invalids, or severely disabled people after the war. People who survived, but, you know, who lost an arm, a leg, and things of that sort. So, and we're talking about 1.4 million people out of a population of about 40 million. That means what? Like 1 in every 25 people was gone. However, the casualties were not distributed in the even way. It was your generation, right? The ages between 18 and 28, 30, every second guy was gone. Right? Whole high school classes were just 70% gone. Into something that, you know, a lot of people began to realize it's, you know, maybe it's about freedom and democracy, but what they're telling us, and you know where the way these fronts looks like. There's a trench on the one side, there's barbed wire, no man's land with landmines, barbed wire, another trench on the other side. And they would have artillery here, typically any of these offensives on the Western Front will start with artillery bombardment for 2 hours, 6 hours, 24 hours. 2,000 guns, heavy caliber. You want to plow this thing. You want to bury everybody on that side. So you bomb them for like as much as you can. By the time you started your bombing, actually, the enemy already knows where you're going to attack. So, okay, you're going to bomb 3 different places. But you know what it takes to bomb something with 2,000 guns for like 6 hours? How many artillery shells, these go off every 2-3 seconds. Boom, boom.
It's a lot of shit.
Who's going to bring that stuff? Who's going to make that stuff?
The civilians.
The civilians. And basically all the railroads are going to be taken over by military shipments. Just bringing the ammunition to the front. And then what happens, drill sergeant, or well, not drill sergeant, sergeant comes over and says, soldiers, the final push. Go up. You're dead in the no man's land because they have machine guns over there and there's cut you into pieces. Or, let's say a good thing happens. You broke the lines, you got there, you're now on this side of the trenches. But these trenches are not just, one trench here, one trench there. There was like system of trenches behind the second line, the third line, so that's why you're going nowhere. In the east, this was a little bit different, actually a lot different. There was a lot of movement on the Eastern Front. And when you look at the map, okay, you'll see these, well, John showed you something similar, right? But anyways, where, here it is. In the east, the Russian Empire was facing Germany and Austria. And poor Romanians kind of got caught in the middle. They had to make up their mind. Before you know it, they were swallowed by Austria and occupied. So I apologize to Romanians, but we've gone pretty quickly. So there was an Austrian part of the front and the German part of the front. In general, for the duration of World War I, Russians did really well on the Austrian part of the front and then really bad on the German part of the front. Simple reason for it was that Germans were better organized and had better supplies. Again, it wasn't, the military issue, but the issue of organization. Stuff that we call total war. Now, did the Germans win? Well, that's kind of hard to tell. Germans thought they won. Trying to make up my mind. And I think they did. In the end, you can say that the Germans won the war on the Eastern Front. This is what happened. Midway during the war, 1916, it was obvious pretty much to everybody in Russia that things were not going well. The Tsar, being patriotic, decided to take matters in his own hands. It ended up being a parade, the Tsar would show up, raise the morale. Nicholas II, right? Nicholas II, Nikolai Romanovs. The last Tsar. Well, he would show up and, followed by priests, and there were symbol. And that worked for a while, but nothing really changed. There were deep structural problems in the Russian war effort and in the Russian society in general. Namely, you're a Russian soldier, you're on the front. Let's say they managed to feed you somehow and give you a rifle and provide you with enough ammunition. And then you start getting news that your folks back there somewhere in a village of Russia are starving. What are you going to do? A lot of people deserted. That's what you're going to do. Left front and said, okay, I need to take care of my family. They said, well, you can't stop me. It's very natural for people to do that. Then a lot of soldiers and this, deserters were around in Russian cities. Soon you start having strikes and rebellions, and in particular in big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. The first rebellion of this kind was in February of 1917. Called the February Revolution. February Revolution. Widespread popular revolution, Russia became a republic. Nicholas was sent into retirement. Nicholas was, a nice man as far as, personalities go. Unfortunately for him, he was out of touch with reality. And there were other things that kind of contributed. His wife was a German. That didn't help either. Actually, you had a similar case in Great Britain when people suddenly started to remember, oh, our English royal family. No, they're not English, they're German. They are German. From Hanover. They used to be called House of Hanover, and then they actually changed their name and went secretly into the courthouse. Windsor. Oh, they picked up a castle somewhere. The Windsors. We're no longer the House of Hanover. We stopped eating sausages, no sauerkraut, nothing of that sort. Anyways, I'm just mentioning this because Tsar really loved his wife. Nicholas really loved his wife, but this was such a time that people were just suspicious. And the Tsarina is German. Anyways, he was sent into retirement, and there was a provisional government in place so that they can organize stuff, prepare elections for, for the new republic. Try to figure out that thing. Their main dilemma was, should we continue the war? There was a debate over that issue, and some, what do you call, like a diplomatic secret initiatives. Okay, let's inquire with the Germans. If we ask for ceasefire, how much territories would the Germans want? You ask this through diplomatic channels. Go to a neutral country. They contact the Germans, and the conditions that the Germans put on the Russian Empire to let it out of the war were bad. And this is the map that kind of shows it. wanted was not a global maritime empire like the British had, but a European empire that stretched from the Baltics onto the Black Sea. Basically, they wanted Ukraine. This area right here is called Ukraine. And Poland, well, Poland was sort of in the way, so let's get Poland. Well, yeah, that's, there is, you can simplify and exaggerate history in this way. But this is what the Germans wanted. They wanted Ukraine to provide bread and other agricultural produce for Germany, and Germany would be an industrialized part of the empire. Ukraine would be an agrarian part of the empire. The provisional government, after February 1917, said, no, we're going to continue the war. Oh, well, the only political force that was against the war openly were the Russian communists or the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir, actually, Lenin was his nickname. His last name was Ulyanov. Ulyanov, a.k.a. Lenin. Lenin had a very clear vision. And it turned out that this vision, in this particular moment in time, was very popular in Russia. His vision was simple: peace. And he stayed on the message as the politicians say today. It's always good for a politician. Pick up one thing and just repeat it 3 million times. And people will follow you. It's kind of funny how it works. And Lenin just had one theme: peace. Actually, make that 1.5 themes. It was actually peace and land. What did Lenin mean by land? Giving land to the peasants. Now, why would you give land to the peasants?
To grow crops.
They didn't have it. It has to do with something that was very peculiar for Russia. It's an institution of serfdom, which was abolished in Russia in 1861. So you would think by 1915, 16, 17, it would no longer be an issue. It was. Not in the sense that there were serfs around. The serfs were given freedom. Serfs mean servants. They're free people, legally speaking, and that means, they can actually make a will, leave their property to their, descendants and stuff of that sort. But they have to serve the nobleman. That's what they're called serfs. It's sort of like an indentured servant for life. So they were given freedom, but they were not given land. But they were given options to purchase land from the nobleman, and given bank credits to pay their mortgages. One of the big problems was that they couldn't afford those mortgages. Why did that happen? Because Russian banks were charging these serfs high interest rates. Why? Well, think of it this way. You have $2 million in a bank, and you go to a bank and say, can I get $3,000 credit? Sure, yeah, there. Do I need to? Nah, we'll send you the papers later. Just take the money and go. Here here is a credit card, spend it. You have no money, you go to the bank and say, can I have $300 credit to buy a second-hand 1979 Ford Taurus? So you can get to work, say, oh, wait, what? Do you have any collateral? And even when they give you credit, they, oh, we'll charge you 14% interest. But you say, well, but you charge that guy 2% interest. Well, you know, he has the money, you know. So, and in short, this was the biggest problem for Russian peasants who got into these mortgages. They were often, you know, 50, 60 years long mortgages, which means that your children are going to pay them off, not yourself. Your children are going to pay off the mortgage. And they just wanted land. So basically what I'm trying to say, that Lenin kind of hit it big with these two magical words: peace, land. Now,
Did he do that in order to get like the largest population of peasants on his side, kind of to ensure that he's going to be successful as a...
these two are linked. Let's start with peace. For him, peace was an issue of deep personal conviction. Lenin believed that this was an imperialist war. Basically, it's the war of the rich. Who's going to control the world? Therefore, ordinary folks, peasants, workers, have no reason to be in this war. For this particular thing, he was called millions of times a traitor. But for him, this was a matter of principle. Now, land was, for Lenin, a means how to get to the popular support. He looked at the Russian society, he knew Russian society, and he grew up in Russia before he was exiled, anyways, but you know, he knew Russia well. He understood Russia better than probably anybody else at the time. And he knew what was the biggest problem in Russia, that, you know, Russia is 80% peasants, and those peasants don't have enough land. Now, he was not the only one to suggest what is called the agrarian reform, or a way of, you know, giving people land for free or for, you know, little money and things of that sort. A lot of other Russian politicians tried to do that. The only difference was that, again, Lenin had a very clear vision and said, you know, it needs to be done. Other politicians will, well, it needs to be done, but, you know, the interests of landowners need to be preserved, this and that, and let's compromise and let's negotiate. And Lenin was, no, take it, give it to the peasants. So his strength was clarity. He knew what he wanted. His weakness was that everybody else accused him that he was a traitor. In October of 1917, there was another rebellion, this time organized by Mr. Ulyanov, that we call the October Revolution of 1917. And Lenin and his, well, it wasn't just that his political parties, but it was there were other political, in particular, his allies were called so-called a peasant party. Russian Peasant Party was his main ally. So there you have, you know, why he was so insistent on the issue of land. Because he got support of the Russian Peasant Party. They were called social revolutionaries. So these two forces came together and said, okay, now peace and land. Actually, peace was number one. The first announcement that the new government made make peace. Well, the Germans also said, well, okay, let's make peace. So what are the conditions? Now you can imagine yourself in the position of the Germans. They offered peace terms 6-7 months earlier. Discreetly, in secret. Now the Russians are coming and asking for peace terms again. What are you going to do? You play poker? You raise the stakes. You want more. And it was a bitter, bitter pill for Lenin and the new government to swallow. And he was opposed, Lenin, by this, he was opposed by his own people. A lot of people in the leading position in his own Bolshevik Communist Party said, no, we cannot accept these terms. It's just too humiliating for Russia. It means basically we lost the war. And it's very difficult to admit that you lost the war. President Kennedy once said, victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeat is an orphan. And I always get into, debate with historians and other people, like Vietnam. It's very hard for us to say we lost the war in Vietnam. You're not going to say anybody say that. Well, it was a draw. It wasn't a victory, but it's very hard to say for, for many people. And Lenin sort of decided to make peace in Germany. Peace was made in March of 1918, next year. Signed at a place called the Brest, nowadays in Belarus. It was a catastrophic peace treaty for new Russian Republic. It immediately led to the civil war in Russia. Basically, when you call somebody a traitor, what's the next step? You start shooting at your compatriots. And that's called civil war, right? This civil war was between two sides that then, came to be known as the Whites and the Reds. But for all practical purposes, Russia was out of the war. Now, how did that affect the Western Front? You look at this map and, you have, 2-3 million German soldiers there on the Eastern Front, and suddenly these people are free to go back to the West. It gave Germans enormous advantage, at least on paper. I don't know. One of the things with World War I is having 2 million people looks nice on paper, but it means that you have to supply those people with guns, ammunition, and everything. And actually Germany didn't have resources to take advantage of this victory. Nevertheless, the Bolshevik Revolution in particular caused panic among all the warring nations. And they were actually actually, this was not something that was happening only on the Eastern Front and in Russia. It was happening in the West. There were rebellions, soldiers' rebellions on the Western Front. French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau, who came to power towards the end of World War I, became really famous for shooting the rebels. When the Tsar was imprisoned by the Bolsheviks, by Lenin's people. Actually, before that, it was obvious to the Tsar ever since February of 1917, ever since he abdicated, that his future in Russia was not bright, and that there were people who wanted him dead. And he asked his cousins in Great Britain to offer him sanctuary. They refused him because they were afraid that there would be a revolution in Great Britain. Similarly, in Germany, Germany was also at the brink of a revolution by the summer of 1918. In Germany, it started with, towards the end of the war, German fleet up there in the northern part, in the city of Kiel, which is close to the German-Danish border. It's a port city on the North Sea. German fleet was given orders to sail out into the North Sea and trying to break the blockade, the British blockade. The soldiers refused and started shooting at their officers. That started the revolution in Germany, which forced the German High Command to sue for peace, to ask for ceasefire. So you have this at the end of World War I, you have this paradoxical situation that Germany just won big in the East. They had a chance on the Western Front, which was not used. Why? Because the United States got into the war. But the front in the West did not collapse. So for ordinary Germans, for, even ordinary soldiers, like a young man called Adolf Hitler, who was actually not a German, he was an Austrian, but since he was living in Germany, he volunteered for the German army. And he could not understand that, what is going on here? We just won in Russia. We are bound to have a great push on the Western Front. The British and the French panicked and told the Americans, look, come and save us. And we did, out of the goodness of our hearts. No, actually, the United States extended credit, in particular to Great Britain and France, to pay for all the expenses of the total war. And that eventually dragged the United States into the war because we were told by the British and the French, if we have 2 million German soldiers marching from the east into the west, you're never going to get repaid. So you have this paradoxical situation in the end that suddenly people were surprised that Germany sued for peace. Now, people in the German High Command knew better. They knew why they were asking for peace. They couldn't maintain the thing any longer. And this is one of those, what if questions. What if, if they stayed a little, what if would have been, what happened in World War II? Go all the way to Berlin, occupy the country, and make sure that everybody knows who won, who lost. But, we'll talk about then the peace negotiations next time. So, okay, enjoy the afternoon.